Hello, hello. Welcome to our March 2025 class for the Solopreneur Diary Entries Premium Edition. This month, we are focusing on face reading for productivity. I am very excited about this class. So we have today, what we're going to be going over is an overview of face reading in classical Chinese medicine. I will attempt to keep it brief, but we all know me. I get wordy and excited about things, and I talk too long about certain things. So I will try to keep it brief, but we will, have a little bit of an overview of what face reading in classical Chinese medicine is all about. We're going to talk about why and how face reading works in conjunction with improving your productivity. And then we're going to go over some examples for how you can actually see your productivity abilities in your own face and what that means, what you can kind of do with that information. So we are just going to dive right in. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, anything at all, I would love to hear it. So you can use the chat if you're here live. And if you're watching the replay, please do send me an email, hello@saganmorrow.com. I would really love to know what you're thinking about this, how this works for you, what you learn as a result of watching this, how you've applied it to your own situation. I would love to know all of that. Okay. A brief overview of face reading in classical Chinese medicine. So there are many different types of face reading. If you are, brand new to this, then yeah, there's different types of it. You might, if you have heard about face reading before, then you might have heard it in other capacities outside of classical Chinese medicine. I do not know about those methods. I don't know how any of those other types of face reading works. I don't know their methods. I'm not sure about how they kind of go about doing things. I was taught through the lens of classical Chinese medicine. I was taught by Lillian Bridges, who was the world's leading authority on face reading before she unfortunately passed away. And so I studied under the Lotus Institute, and her family goes back many generations of face readers, back to the Ming Dynasty. So she has a long history and tradition in her family of face reading, which is very cool. She also, her entire thing with the Lotus Institute was wanting more and more people to know about face reading. And so she was really excited about teaching more students to then be able to spread the word and to do face reading sessions for people and all of that kind of thing. So I believe that she would be absolutely delighted, just tickled that we are talking about face reading through the lens of productivity today. When it comes to classical Chinese medicine, there are 5 elements. And so these are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. So those might sound a little bit familiar. There's different variations of that type of thing in a variety of different cultures. And so when it comes to classical Chinese medicine, when we're talking about face reading, those are kind of the 5 different elements that will show up on the face. Now, we all have a combination of these different elements within us, but it's likely that 1 or 2 of these elements is going to be stronger. For example, I have a lot of the water element in my face, which is also very funny to me because water people are typically very, go with the flow. They need to rest a lot. So this whole concept of anti-hustle productivity that I use, that I am known for, it's extremely watery to do that type of thing. So it is kind of funny to be able to kind of recognize those different sorts of things and to be able to see how the way that you live your life is reflective of the elements that are strongest within you. Now, depending on the strength of the different elements on your face and the interaction between those different features, that can say a lot about your personality. So just because you have a lot, maybe very strong water as well, that doesn't mean that we would have the exact same relationship to productivity, for example, because of the different other elements that might be at play, the way that the different features interact, the different lines on your face, all of that kind of thing. So that is a really important thing to keep in mind, that as we are talking about face reading today, these are broad concepts, and I'm going to be giving you very specific types of information about looking at your own face. However, it is going to be dependent on what the other elements of your face, how they show up, the other strength of features and things like that. So it's always going to need to be customized to what your unique face looks like. Now, so the 5 elements is kind of like one of the different aspects that we're looking at when we do a face reading session. Another aspect that we might look at is what's called the 3 treasures. So this is your Qi, Jing, and Shen. And this is really about who you are at your core and what you do with the energy that is available to you, and also your presence and your connection to being in the world. For example, when you are my client in a coaching session and you are having some kind of a breakthrough, when I see your eyes light up, that is your Shen shining through. So it's really cool to be able to see these different types of things showing up. So you could spend an entire face reading sessions just looking at your Shen, for example. Another aspect of face reading that sometimes can come up, very often can come up, is kind of like the topographical map of your face. This is mountains versus rivers versus plains and valleys. And this is about the features and the spaces on your face. So mountains are your bone structure. This could be how prominent your nose is or your jaw, those types of things. Rivers are where there's any type of tears or mucus, any bodily fluids. Those are the rivers of the face. Plains are the spaces across the face and anywhere that flesh can accumulate. So this could be like the lower cheeks. And they really indicate that you know how to live a life of comfort and pleasure and things like that. And then valleys are where the energy sinks. So it's the opposite of the plains. For example, really sunken cheeks, that's often prized highly in our society. It's viewed as very attractive, but it's actually not nearly as healthy as having, some nice plumpness to those cheeks, a little bit fuller in the cheeks. So that is another aspect of the face that we might often look at in face reading. Another sort of aspect of face reading that we often will look at is the lines on the face. So different lines, wrinkles, those types of things. Now, I find lines absolutely fascinating because they are formed by repeated expressions, and it can also be the suppression of expressions. Basically, everything that you are feeling is going to show up on your face, whether you want it to or not. It's really, even if you are trying to hide your emotions, there's probably going to be that micro moment of that expression showing up on your face. And that is where lines on the face can really tell you a lot of information about a person. I just need some tea. I don't want it to, I just realized I was like, oh, I have my tea with me and I don't want it to like get cold here. So hold on a sec. Okay, I've had some tea. I'm good now. Yes, so lines are really interesting on the face. And the other aspect about this as well is that different lines can show up. So there could be, like grief lines, there could be joy lines, that sort of thing. And it's often about how you feel. It's not so much about what happened to you. So someone might have very deep grief lines about a particular event that happened in their life that to someone else that would not be a big deal. It doesn't matter what the event is. It matters how you feel about it and how you react to it. That is what matters, and how it affects you is what is going to then show up on your face. A few other different things that we might look at in a face reading session could be the age markings on the face. When you're looking at a face, different sections of the face indicate different decades. So we have the 20s are your forehead, the eyes area is your 30s, the nose is your 40s, then we have like 50s, 60s, 70s, and then it goes 80s, 90s, and 100, sort of like up the side here. The first before you get to your teens, from, conception until teens, is your ears. You can read those. So that's another aspect. Face shape is another aspect, the different shapes of your faces. I don't use that as much. The right versus left side of your face can also have a lot of information. So oftentimes our faces are not symmetrical. So I'm just pulling back my hair here so you can kind of see my face. I do not, if I like cover one side and then I cover the other side, there's not actually a ton of symmetry. And that can kind of be that sort of indication of wanting to, there's that private versus public side. So the right side is the public side and the left side is the private. Now I have my hair parted on this side, so my hair kind of covers my right side of my face. And really that's me wanting more people to be able to see the inner thoughts and feelings that are going on within me. And so we can tell a lot of information about the different things that comes up on a person's face based on which features might be bigger on one side versus another, for example, or lines that might be on one side versus another, all of that sort of stuff. The 3 zones of the face is another way to do face reading. So we can look at it as the upper, middle, and lower zones of the face. And we can also look at the face as a representation of the body. So in this case, the nose is your spinal column. Joy lines, right? When you smile and you have those little lines that kind of crinkle up at the sides, those are like little hands, like little jazz hands. So you can kind of see the entire body on the face. So those are a few different ways in which you and I could do a face reading session. So those are the different ways that we read faces in classical Chinese medicine, the way that I was taught. That's a lot, right? There's a lot of different aspects to face reading. So we don't, try to do all of that in a single session. We don't try to cram it all in, but those are the different things that we might be looking at. There are also many different ways that you can then use that information and apply it, right? So we are talking today, we're going to be getting into face reading for productivity, but I kind of want to just give you a background of some of the other different ways you can look at it. So for example, face reading as a diagnostic tool, it was originally used for women hundreds of years ago because doctors couldn't touch women's bodies. So that was one of the ways that they did it. As I said, the face can be like a little human, like your body. So if there are markings on the face, if there's any sort of discoloration and things like that, all of that can factor in. So you can see the entire body based on the face, and it can be used diagnostically. And my teacher, Lillian, actually taught medical doctors these methods of how to diagnose people using the face, which was really, really cool. You can also use face reading for detecting lies, for lie detection, and for recognizing signs of sociopaths. So again, my teacher Lillian taught a lot of law enforcement and police officers how to use face reading as part of, when they do have criminals in hand, when they are trying to do lie detecting and all that sort of thing. Face reading can be used for business in terms of marketing and sales and communication, how to best do marketing for a particular person based on what their face says. Face reading can be used for matchmaking, compatibility. Does your face, does it have complementary features to your spouse's? Do they match up really well? Is there indication that you challenge each other in healthy ways? All of that sort of thing. And then you can also use face reading to understand yourself better, to learn more about who you are and what's right for you. That's kind of considered the golden path in classical Chinese medicine. And that also is something that, does intrigue me very much, coming at it from that personal fulfillment lens, because I am a personal fulfillment coach when I'm not teaching about productivity. So there is a lot that your face says about you. There is so much that we can use face reading for. There's so much that we can learn about ourselves and different ways that we can apply the information that our face says about who we are. And so again, different face readers are going to focus on these different types of things. They might have different specialties. And since I am a personal fulfillment coach and a solopreneur productivity coach, I'm just especially fascinated about how we can apply face reading to personal fulfillment and to increasing your productivity. So what we are covering today is going to just scratch the surface of face reading for productivity. If you want to learn more about your unique face, then we can book a one-on-one face reading session. Just email hello@saganmorrow.com for details about that and how we can set that up. Okay, So that's your little overview about face reading in classical Chinese medicine. Now let's talk about how face reading works in conjunction with improving your productivity. Depending on which element is strongest in your face, that can indicate your relationship with time management, with schedules, with deadlines. It can also indicate whether you need more rest and whether anti-hustle productivity is going to be particularly important for you compared to someone else who might have more physical stamina, for example. Now, in classical Chinese medicine, your Jing is your ability to make use of what you've got. So I mentioned earlier that there's the three treasures, which are your Jing, Qi, and your Shen. And so your Jing is that energy that you have. And so it's very important not to overuse your Jing. Your Jing actually shows up in cycles. You get these like Jing infusions throughout your life about every 7-ish years or so. So at each of the 7-year marks, that's when you get a little burst of that Jing infusion, that little maybe extra energy in your life. And everyone starts out with different amounts of Jing. So you can measure your ear. You can measure your Jing. You can take your ear, pinch at the top to see how thick the cartilage is. Okay, that is how you can kind of tell. So give it a little wiggle, see how much you can flex it. And so if it's more rigid or stiff or hard, then that indicates that you have more Jing. If it's thinner and softer, then you're going to have to manage your Jing a lot more carefully than someone else. So if yours is thin and soft, when you kind of do a little wiggle, when you flex it around a bit, if it's thinner and softer, in that case, I would really recommend that you do focus on anti-hustle productivity specifically. It's going to be that much more important for you to conserve your energy and to be highly strategic about it. Someone who has that more rigid, stiff, kind of harder cartilage there on the ear, you can overexert yourself potentially, right? Like you can have that sort of extra energy. And you can bring in extra Jing. Okay, so doing what you are meant to be doing the things that brings you joy is what does give you extra Jing. So this often means something like being more creative, right? That can really save you from overusing your Jing in other ways. So that really comes back to, again, a lot of the stuff that we talk about with anti-hustle productivity. If you're inside Productivity Powerhouse, if you've been on my newsletter for any period of time, then you will know that these types of things really allowing your creativity to come through, really prioritizing that type of thing is very important. And it's very beautiful. It was really beautiful to then be studying face reading in classical Chinese medicine and to have so many of my own anti-hustle productivity philosophies and methods be very reinforced by this entire, this whole thing with classical Chinese medicine. So it's very cool. Now, when it comes to working versus resting in anti-hustle productivity and your relationship to toxic hustle culture, how well rested you are and how much rest you need does show up in your face. So the ways in which your personality and your lifestyle, in the ways that you want to sort of take your personality and your lifestyle into account, that does affect your productivity. You are not made to fit into a box. Okay, that is one of the things that happens with toxic hustle culture. It tries to force you to do things in a certain way that really takes away from who you are. And your brain and your personality, your lifestyle, these things are all unique. So your productivity methods should be designed with you at the foundation, which again, we can learn more about by studying your particular face. And everyone has very different energy levels, very different relationship to productivity and to time management. So you really want to ensure that you are building that relationship and strengthening it based on your particular situation. So how does this show up on your face? Okay. So lots of mountain features, right? We were talking about the topographical map of the face earlier. And one of the ways we can look at this is your mountain features when it comes to productivity. So mountain features are, again, those strong bones on the face. These are things like your forehead, your cheekbones, your nose, your chin, your jaw. If you have a lot of those, so if you're looking at yourself in the mirror and those are the types of things that really stand out, then that indicates that you have a drive to achieve something. You really enjoy challenges and struggles. And so that's really good to know about yourself when it comes to productivity, because then you can use that information. You can sort of see, okay, if I am the type of person who does well when I have that drive, when I am challenged, then you can seek out those types of things that are going to challenge you a little bit more. You can allow yourself to have a bit more of that. If you have more river features, so those are things like having big eyes, big mouth, big ears, anything associated with bodily fluid, then you are in a better position to have an easier life. So you are more interested in enjoying time to the fullest, in getting support. So you're going to be more likely to ask for and accept help. Now, if you have more of those river features and you struggle to ask for help, then that really indicates that that's something that you're going to need to work on, because you are designed to get more support from people and to get help from people. If you have more of the plains, right, where the flesh accumulates versus the valleys where that energy sort of sinks, well, in that case, plains are that ability to enjoy life more fully and to have that sort of more positive attitude. And when it comes to valleys, if you have a lot more sort of sunken areas where there should be flesh, that's typically indicative that you're more likely to focus on what's wrong or what you don't have. And so your face can change if you do have a lot of those valleys right now. And if you are that type of person who then has that kind of sinking energy, if you want to grow your planes, then it's important to build up your practice of gratitude and enjoy what you do have. That's going to be very helpful for you. And I will say that in that case, if you are struggling with, being able to appreciate what you've got and that sort of thing, if you do find that you have a lot more of those valleys, those sort of sunken areas of the face, then what you're probably going to find is that it is affecting your productivity. It's affecting your ability to maybe put yourself out there and be visible and go after your goals, those types of things. Whereas if you have more of the planes, then you're probably going to have that more positive attitude, that more positive outlook on life, and you will be able to stay on track with things a little bit better, potentially. Now, if you have a really tight neck where you can see the tendons there, right, that is typically related to overworking. And you probably feel as though you really like overworking. You probably feel like you really enjoy work and you are working because you like it so much. In that case, it's going to be very hard for you to stop overworking, and you might also not know how to stop. But having that really tight neck, those tendons, that does indicate that you are overworking. So that is a good opportunity for you to maybe take a look at, okay, how can I inject a little bit more pleasure into my life? How can I maybe pull back a little bit and start to enjoy other aspects of life just as much as I enjoy work? Now, age also factors into it. So remember earlier I was talking about how your 20s are the forehead, 30s are the eyes, 40s the nose, that sort of thing. Well, river features, right? So those are the areas associated with bodily fluids. That is a time to live more yin. So more of that sort of resting a little bit more. And mountain features, which are, like the nose, the forehead, things like that, that's a time to live more yang, which is a little bit more, maybe working a bit more, maybe being a bit more active. So in that case, if you are in your 30s, that is a decade to maybe pull back a little bit, to rest a little bit more. Whereas your 40s might be a time where you can work a little bit more, where you can be a little bit more active. Now, this is, as with all of this, again, it's going to be very, very much specific to your unique situation, your unique face. So this is a general rule. This is a broad overview. And it's also worth thinking back to previous aspects of your life. So for example, if you are now in your 40s, but in your 30s, you overworked a lot, then in that case, you might need a little bit more rest in your 40s because you didn't get it during that decade of your 30s when you were kind of supposed to pull back a little bit. And again, other aspects of your unique face is going to factor into this. So this is, again, just a broad sort of rule, right? Now, if you're thinking about this and you are a person who maybe wants to change your face, if there's parts of your face that you don't like and you want to change, I would encourage you to first learn more about what that part of your face says about you, what the meaning is behind that, and do some exploration into how that resonates with you. How do you feel about that? Does it change your view of your face when you know what the meaning is behind it? Your face can change. You can change your face. You can change your face, which is really, really cool. What you're kind of doing in that case is you are becoming more of you, but a different part of yourself. So you can really look at your face and you can bring out different parts of yourself. You can grow a chin, right? You can grow a nose. You can do different things. When you think about photographs of people who are elderly, when you look back at photos of them when they were in their 20s versus their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, as they get older, you can see how much some people's faces can change. And that is really based on our lived experiences and how we interact with the world around us and what is going on internally. All of that factors into our faces. So your face can change. Lines can disappear from your face. It's really incredible how much your face can actually change. So when you know more about your own face, then you can identify what parts of yourself you want to bring out and share with the world and embody, and how your face can reflect that. Okay. So let's talk about the 5 examples for how to see productivity abilities in your face. Building on what we were just exploring, I want to get into a little bit more based on the elements specifically. So that's for our purposes today. Again, we can get into all different aspects of face reading, but for our purposes today, I thought that it would be nice for us to explore the strength of each of those elements: water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And so we're going to look at how that kind of shows up on your face. And again, most people are a combination of several elements, and the ways in which different features interact on your face is going to affect the strength of different types of features. So you always want to be looking at your face as a whole, not just one little aspect of it or one specific aspect. You also want to look at the surrounding features and what all of that sort of says about you. But for our purposes today, this is going to give you a little bit of an idea of how you can use this information for your own face, for your own situation, and your own productivity abilities. Okay, we are going to start with the water element. So the water element is typically go with the flow, pretty flexible. And the main water features on the face are the ears, the forehead, and the chin. And so again, as I mentioned that I am a watery person. You can see like the sides of my ears. Like I have quite large ears, right? And so one of the things with water people is that they can sometimes be too accommodating of others. So that's an important thing to watch for if you are a water person. And there's going to be a lot more rest that is needed for water people. Water people are not lazy, but they can be perceived by society as lazy because of our toxic productivity perspective on things in our society. And so water people are typically very good at protecting and preserving their energy, and they can also be very persistent when they are, putting their minds to something. So you can think about any of these elements, the metaphors of them, right? So when it comes to that persistence, that's like a water drop, right? How it just keeps on dropping. And we think about the flow of it, right? So like a river flow and a stream flowing. So different ways that water can move. We also think about the rest of a really still lake and the way that water can just be very still. So those are the different types of things that we can kind of think about when we're looking at the different, the sort of makeup, the personality makeup of a particular element. Okay, so with the ears, we're talking about ears and productivity. Big ears can relate back to more of an ability to bring out your Jing. So you can more readily access your Jing, which is, that kind of like creative energy. Now, if you have larger earlobes, then you probably understand that things don't need to be rushed, that there's a time for things to unfold as they're meant to. And the way to really measure those earlobes is when you put your thumb on your earlobe and you pinch it, if it takes up that whole space of your knuckle, then you have a larger earlobe. Okay, that's so you can kind of tell. And in that case, you are going to be more future-oriented and have the ability to grow things, have less of a discomfort or fear of running out of time. Smaller earlobes indicate that you are more likely to not be as good with long-term planning. So that's a good thing to keep in mind from that productivity angle. If you aren't as good with long-term planning, then you could probably benefit from getting that support to help you with that, being able to think more long-term. Another aspect of the water feature was the chin. And so if you have a cleft chin, if you have that little kind of like a dimple there, or that mark, that kind of like a mark, right? Like a divot in your chin, in that case, you might crave approval from other people. So that can indicate that you would do well from that productivity standpoint of working in the limelight, being visible, showcasing what you're doing, that sort of thing. You're going to thrive in those types of environments. That will probably be really helpful from a productivity standpoint. If you have a high forehead, which I do, my forehead is quite high, you need a lot more time to process information and think things through. In other words, you might be viewed as not being super decisive. And you'll probably be someone who will do well with doing pros and cons lists, okay? Now, if you have more of a bottom-heavy face, in that case, your decisions are going to be better off based in emotions. So if you have that shorter forehead, then you can rely more on your gut. Whereas when that sort of lower third of your face, right? We were talking about like those middle zones, the three zones of your face, the upper, the middle, and the lower. And so when you have that lower third of your face that is more dominant, then you're going to be more about emotions and feelings with the decisions that you make. Those are going to feel better for you to make decisions that are more emotions based. Whereas if you have a particularly high forehead and a much larger upper third of your face, then you're going to work better thinking things through more sort of logically, methodically. And so having more of that middle zone as the dominant zone of your face, in that case, you're going to be more of that sort of practical minded type of thing. So looking at, okay, what works, what makes the most sense, those are going to be the best, that's going to be kind of the best way for you to make decisions, is looking at from the practical side of things. So understanding what you need to make those decisions can really help you to focus more on intellectualizing versus emotions, for example. Depending on which zone of your face is the most dominant, that can help you with decision making, with how to go about making decisions for you. Okay, now let's get into the wood element. So the wood element is all about doing, and it is very time bound. The wood features are strong eyebrows, brow bone, and jaw. Now, our society's concept of productivity is very woody. Time is a wood construct. You have a strong drive if you are more of a woody person. Wood people often work really long hours and typically think that they are much more productive than they are. So that whole concept of, working for 40 hours a week, a wood person will enjoy that, right? They'll be like, yeah, I worked 40 hours a week. There's going to be a bit of a glorification of busy work. They'll be so focused on the amount of time that they're working that they might not be really looking at the outcomes of the work that they are doing and the result of that. Now, if you have strength in wood features on your face, you will likely do better working on a single project in one fell swoop. Rather than task switching and jumping around from one task to the next, you're going to do better at spending a larger chunk of time on completing one single task. So if you're a woody person, that is going to be helpful to keep in mind from that task management sort of perspective. And when we talk about the strength and features, what we're really looking at here is what's sort of most noticeable. Do you have striking eyebrows, or is your jaw one of the first things that people notice about you? Or do you have a really prominent nose, right? All of that can indicate what sort of strength of an element that you have. And some features are a little bit harder to check for the strength. So for example, when it comes to the jaw, what you can actually do is feel for that bone at the back. There's that knotted bone at the back, and you can feel the strength for it. And mine is actually extremely strong. Like mine's very strong. You would not be able to really, you can't really tell when you're sort of looking at me face on. You can't really tell that I have a strong jaw, but I actually do have a quite strong jaw. So that is also something to keep in mind when it comes to face reading. Some of these different aspects are a little bit trickier to know, right? Some of it is more by feel, kind of like how we were feeling our ears earlier. You can feel your jaw. Some of it's a little bit more by feel than what you can necessarily see. But that's one of the things that you can kind of tell when it comes to how when you're looking at the strength of different features and the interaction of them. That's kind of what we're talking about here. What's noticeable? What jumps out at you? Those types of things. Now, when it comes to the wood element as well, there can be more of a desire for competitiveness, for hierarchy, and for incentives. So if you have more strength in wood features than any other element on your face, you might need to look into ways that you can tap into competition or get rewarded for the work that you're doing to be more productive. That's going to be a good motivator for you. If there's a little bit of a competitive edge kind of thrown in there, or if there's some kind of incentive, some kind of reward system that you can tap into, that's probably going to help with keeping you moving forward, with keeping that momentum up with your productivity. Wood people are also very good at team stuff, really good at teams, so working with other people. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that if you are a woody person, you might do well connecting with others. Okay, let's get into the fire element. So fire people, again, we're thinking about the metaphor of these elements and what that says, right? So wood people tend to be a little bit more sort of like rigid, right? And when it comes to the fire element, a little bit more spontaneity. Fire people tend to have more trouble finishing things. They're going to be jumping around from one thing to the next, right? Sort of think about the way that fire works, right? The way that fire moves. And fire people tend to hate being bored as well. So the fire features are the eyes, any tips and corners of your face. So if you have like really pointed lips, if your inner canthus of your eyes is really pointed, if you have like a really pointed nose, that sort of thing, those are all sort of fire aspects. And then the lines of the face. Anytime that you have a lot of lines on your face, wrinkles, that sort of thing, that's more strength of fire as well. So a few notes about that. If you have lines down your cheeks right here, okay, those are stress lines. So that can really indicate that you are overworking. And so that's going to be a good thing to sort of pay attention to, that if you do have kind of a little divot there, any dips, lines, markings on the lower cheeks, that's stress. That's probably indicating that you are working yourself a little bit too hard, to the bone, right? Now, the middle of the face, in classical Chinese medicine face reading, the middle of the face is the river of life. And so any type of marking or lines down the middle of your face is that's really important information. That says a lot about you, okay? So these could be vertical lines or horizontal lines, anything that's down that middle of your face. And that can help you to know a little bit more about how you're connecting with your creativity and living your life in your best way, and whether you're internalizing unhelpful ideas about the world that are creating obstacles for you. So different things like lines down the middle. So if we go to like a vertical line, for example, between the eyebrows, right? That's pretty common in our society. One vertical line, two or three, they have different meanings, but what that can connect back to, a vertical line down the center, can connect back to communication issues where you are avoiding confrontation, where you have repressed anger or frustration or resentment, all of which can absolutely harm your productivity. So if you have that line down here, then that is something that likely means that you have some process work to do. It could indicate that you have, that again, you are sort of suppressing things that you want to be able to communicate, that you aren't expressing anger, frustration, irritation, resentment, those types of things, and you aren't working through those sorts of things. So that is going to be a good thing to note for you, because again, that's going to probably get in the way of your client work, right? The way that you interact with customers is probably going to affect how you show up in the world and doing marketing, all of those types of things. So that's going to be something to address. Now, if you are a fire person, fire people can be scattered. Fire people are typically not good at time management. Fire people are often running late, getting distracted, that sort of thing. So you might need to set up your work so that time is not a major factor. If you are a fire person and if you do struggle with time management, then looking at your business, what can you do to kind of take that time out of the equation so that it's not such a time-bound business that you have? So that's going to be something to think about. And I also want to note here that, again, this is always going to be very much based on your unique situation. And so all of this needs to be factored into what your particular face is like. So, for example, my spouse has a very fiery face. He's very strong in the fire element, but he also has strength in the wood element. And that creates this very interesting thing where he's excellent at time management. He is really, really great at he's not late. He does not run late. He always has things done on time. He's very good at productivity and that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting dynamic, the wood and the fire element for him in the workplace. It actually works beautifully. He's a very hard worker. He's extremely productive from a true productivity standpoint, not toxic productivity, which is really cool to kind of see that sort of thing. So the interaction of the elements on your face will factor into this always. Okay, let's get into the earth element. So the earth element, earth people need others. So if you are strong in the earth element, you're going to do very well working with other people, working in teams, that sort of thing. Earth features are the mouth, the lower cheeks, and above the lips. There's a nice sort of soft, almost like a plumpness that can occur for earth people. Now, earth people have a deep aversion to causing distress in others. So as you can imagine, that can really put you in the habit of putting other people before you. And so when you think about that in the workplace, it's wonderful, beautiful that you care a lot about your clients and your customers, but it should not be to the point where you stop taking good care of yourself. That's going to be an important thing to keep in mind. And earth people don't like change very much. So setting things up in your business for a lot of repetition and habits and sustainable practices, that's going to be especially valuable to you if you're an earthy person. Whereas if you're a fire person, because fire people get bored easily and like spontaneity, then in that case, you'll probably want to set things up so that even if your business is beautifully sustainable, you have an opportunity to connect with multi-passionate interests. You have the opportunity to add in new things as you go along, right? So keeping all of this in mind from how you grow your business, if you are a solopreneur, that's going to be very useful for you. And then we have the metal element. If you are a metal person, you will really love rituals. You're more likely to be a perfectionist. And the metal features are the nose, the cheekbones, and moles, the spaces on the face. So I also have a good amount of metal in me. And so a prominent nose, if you have more of a prominent nose, if that's kind of the first thing that people really notice about you, if that's like the striking feature on your face, that indicates ambition and leadership and independence. Now, again, when we're looking at the face, as I mentioned earlier, feeling the face can also give us a lot of good information. So if you gently pinch, very gently, that part of your nose between your eyes, then you can kind of gauge the width of that bridge of your nose, okay? Now, the narrower that part of your nose is, the narrower it is, the less hard that you can work. the less energy that you have to work. So I'm sure it will surprise no one that when I feel that bone, it's quite narrow. It's quite narrow. But that can be really useful to keep in mind that if you do have a more narrow bone right there between your eyes and that nose, you are going to have to, again, maybe like pull back a little bit. Anti-hustle productivity methods are going to be that much more important for you than someone else who can work a lot harder, who just has that sort of stamina, that kind of energy that can just keep on going. Metal people are very practical. You understand what makes sense, and you might also not have a lot of patience for people who do not do things the way that you know is the best possible way. Metal people can also be very good at saving energy because you are really focused on this is the way to do it. You're not wasting your time doing a bunch of other sort of fluffy things. So there can be also a lot of really great aspects around improving yourself, wanting to improve yourself, wanting to improve things to be the best that they can be if you have a lot of metal. Now, being very critical of yourself and finding fault with yourself can be that dark side of metal. So that's something to watch for. And you'll want to think about this as how can you kind of tap into that perfectionism by maybe doing more detail-oriented type of things, right? So how can you actually use that perfectionism as more of a strength than a weakness? Maybe you get to create things that are, flawless by doing more detail-oriented work. And I find that for some of my clients who are perfectionists, it actually works out really well if they are freelance editors. I've worked with many editors over the years, and for them, it's almost a way to channel perfectionism into it because they can like fix what is wrong with a book by editing it. So in that case, they can make use of perfectionism as something that is helpful and take that perfectionism away from other aspects of their life or their business. They can really focus on being more, again, detail-oriented, of fixing mistakes, fixing flaws, making something as good as it can possibly be, okay? So that is something to take into consideration if you are a metal person. How can you kind of channel that perfectionism into a way that is useful for you? And problem solving, as you can imagine, is also a specialty of metal people. So that can be a really good area for you to focus on as well if you are have strength in the metal features, if you do have strength in the metal element. The other aspect to keep in mind for metal people, you will likely do better at working in smaller steps over a longer period of time. So working on something for a little bit and then taking a break, or working on this task for a little while and then hopping over here, working on this task for a little while and then this task for a little while. So so it's not the same as the way that fire people can work, of just like jumping around all over the place. With metal people, it's a little bit more methodical of, okay, I'm going to focus on this for a bit. Okay, now I'm done with that. Now I'm going to focus on this for a bit. Whereas again, when I mentioned earlier about wood people, if you have strength in the wood elements, that's going to throw you off by trying to work on too many things at once. You need to really get, one thing done before going on to the next thing. Okay, so those are the 5 elements. And that's a little bit of the ways that that you can sort of gauge, okay, what is the different strength of these elements in my face, and how you can kind of use that information from a productivity standpoint. Now, I have here 5 questions that you might be wondering. So we're going to address them through the lens of face reading and classical Chinese medicine. So these are 5 productivity questions. Question number 1. Why am I always struggling to meet deadlines? If you struggle to meet deadlines, it might be a source of frustration for you. And in that case, if this is you, you probably are not quite using your wood energy the right way. You might be overusing it or underusing it, or you just might not be a woody person at all, right? You might be glorifying busy work and then spending so much time working that you aren't actually making progress on the right things. So even if you are a woody person, you might be overusing it or using it in a way that's not actually serving you. It's not actually helpful for you. Now, fire people, as I mentioned, are often running late. They're running behind with things. They can get distracted easily. They tend not to plan as much. So if you are a fire person, that also might be why deadlines are a little bit harder for you. And in this case, it's important to ask, where are you forcing yourself to fit into a specific way of doing things? Okay. If you are fiery and you're always running late, what can you do to build in extra buffers there for yourself, to help yourself, to support yourself? Or how can you change the time to trick yourself? So for example, if a deadline is next Wednesday, change it everywhere in your calendar, on your task list, all of those different things, so that the deadline says that it's actually Monday. So that way, even if you're the type of person who works well under pressure, all of that pressure can happen on the Monday, and you can get it in for the Monday. You can get it in before the deadline. Or if you are running late, if you always miss your deadlines, if you have it planned in your mind that you are going to do it, but you are going to have it completed by the Monday, then even if you're running late, you'll still have it for the actual real deadline of the Wednesday. So you can kind of play with yourself in that way, right? You can kind of trick yourself a little bit by trying to work with already who you are and how your brain works, and just accommodate things around that. And you can also look at the types of products and the services that you offer. So are they time bound? Do you keep on offering products and services that rely on you showing up at a certain time and doing things within a certain time limit? If you're a fire person, that's probably not going to be as helpful for you. So in that case, you can restructure your offering so that the time-bound aspect is not a factor for you. And that's probably going to help you. Whereas if you are more of that wood person, you're probably going to thrive on having time-bound things. You're going to really love having specific deadlines. You're going to be loving looking at the clock and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, question number 2. How can I get better at time management? So this builds on our previous question. If you have issues with time, it typically, again, means something's gone wrong with your wood, or something's just not quite lining up, right? It's worth looking at the time of day that is best for you. So if you're in Productivity Powerhouse, then we do talk about this as well, the different times of day and making sure that you're working based on your best time of day. And so again, bringing face reading and classical Chinese medicine into this can be really helpful, because water people, for example, tend to love the nighttime. That's when, the brain waves kind of quiet down a little bit. Whereas fire people tend to love the morning. So you can kind of use that information based on who you are, based on what element is strongest within you. You can then structure your workday to kind of accommodate that. So if you are more fiery, you might be better at creating a schedule where you work earlier in the day, versus if you are more of a water person, you might need a more leisurely start to your morning. And the idea here is that you really need to understand yourself, right? You need to understand yourself in order to improve time management in your own unique ways. Presence is another very important factor here. So the more time that you spend worrying about things outside of who you are, or the different things that you cannot change, right? The things that are external from you, the more that you're going to give up your power over your own time. So being more present can help with that. Now, one of the ways to actually assess your own presence is looking at your temples. And so if your temples are more indented, as mine are, right? There's a little indentation, then you are being present might be a little bit of a struggle for you. Now, for me, and this might be the same for you as well, how this shows up is a very big imagination. So I like spending a lot of time in my head, right? I like sort of imagining things and that sort of thing. For other people, it can be more of a sort of spiritual aspect, right? But either way, it typically indicates that we're spending less time in our bodies, right? Being in our bodies, and more time kind of out there. So if you have plumper temples, then that is indicating that you are being more present, that you're actually being in your body, you're enjoying the here and now. So that's a good way to gauge how well you're doing at these different things. And you will know as well that I even talked recently, if you are on my, if you get the Solopreneur Diary Entries newsletter every Saturday, which is different than these monthly classes. If you get that newsletter every Saturday, it's free. But I recently was actually just talking about the presence factor and how I had realized like, oh, I wasn't being as present as I should be, right? So this is a good way to kind of check for yourself and to sort of see like, am I being as present as it could be? And actually, even if I'm just looking at my screen right now, and I actually am being, it's not as indented as it was. It's a little bit more on the right side. That's very interesting. But it's less so on the left side. So I'm working on it. I'm getting better at it, right? So it's really interesting to see how much our faces can change. And also, another really cool thing is that your face can change a lot really quickly. Some things take a lot longer, like bones growing on your face, right? Like that's going to take much longer periods of time. But something like lines on your face, depending on the depth of them, which, you know, like the deeper they are, the more work there is to do, the more processing that we need to do. If they're more shallow lines, we can get rid of them very quickly. We can actually move them from the face within a short amount of time. So faces can change a lot, which is very cool. Very cool. Okay. Now, if you are not a wood person, or if you have issues with wood, getting back to this question of how can I get better at time management, you might want to lean on other elements where you are stronger. So for example, water people are really good at feeling time. Water people have a good innate sense of time. Whereas, you know, again, with wood people are very much like looking at the clock, like human time is what wood people are really good at. Water people are better at like feeling time, like understanding time, at more of like an innate sort of standpoint. Metal people have a divine timing sort of energy. So if you have strength in the metal features, then there's an aspect of self-trust that really needs to come into play, where when you are trusting in yourself, when you are trusting in things work out, everything unfolds on its own timing, that is going to be very supportive for you as a metal person. And so if we are trying to force ourselves to be too much of a different element that we are not, if we try to force that too much, it's going to create a little bit of stickiness. It's going to be a lot harder, right? So we want to be able to live time in the way that suits our personality and that suits the element that is strongest for us, which again is why if you aren't as woody, focusing on the clock is going to be a little bit trickier to do. And by the way, this is also one of those things where this factors into your own estimates of how long time it takes you to do a certain task, right? So again, if you're more of a water person like I am, you're probably going to be really good at estimating how long a thing is going to take you. You're probably going to be very good at it because you can just feel time in that sort of way. And if you are sort of more of that wood person, then you're going to do really well if you're focusing on the clock and having time constraints around a particular project. So that's another thing that plays into all of this. Now, your eyebrows are really helpful when you're looking at taking action and making decisions. So the more arched that your eyebrows are, the better you are at taking action. Right? If you kind of think about like the Nike swish, right? Like the eyebrows going kind of up and down, that is the action taking movement. Whereas the more straight across your eyebrows are, the more time that you need to make decisions. And again, if we're looking at my face, they're pretty straight across, right? Like there's not a whole lot of arch to my eyebrows. And so that can be a factor to consider as well when it comes to your time management, because sometimes time management can be a decision-making factor. There's so many things. We have the entire productivity powerhouse e-course because time management there's so much stuff behind time management. It's often not about the actual time that's available to us. There's often a lot of other things at play here. And one of them can be, if you have issues with time management, it can connect back to your decision-making skills and your decision-making abilities. So if for you in a particular instance, you're having issues with time management because it connects back to a decision-making problem, then you may need to adjust how you approach decisions so that you have enough time to make the ones that are right for you. Question number 3, why does that person over there have so much more energy than I do? Okay, well, do they have more energy, or do they have more of a type of energy that is more respected in our current society? Can they work for a lot longer of hours, but can you maybe get more done in a third of the time that it takes them, right? Even physical abilities can connect back to this. So some people naturally love to run, right? Which is often, if you're a fire person or a wood person, you're probably going to do better with running. You're probably going to really enjoy that sort of thing. Whereas other people love walking. If you're more water person, more earth person, you will enjoy that type of thing, sort of more of that sort of slow and steady sort of thing. So in that case, why are you putting someone else's natural energy on a pedestal? Not everyone is a runner, right? Not everyone is a dancer. Not everyone is. So really take into consideration that there's no type that is better or worse than the others. It just is. It just is. It's just different. So if someone has a lot more energy than you, rather than trying to live life or do business the way that they're doing it, really tap into your own energy levels and what is right for you and what your natural inclination is. Another factor here, we're looking at energy. You talked a little bit about the physical side of energy. You can also think about the energy that you have in interactions with people. So for example, your eye set can indicate your social abilities. So when you hold up a finger to your eyes, see how your eyelashes touch your finger. Okay, so if your eyelashes do not touch your finger when you go like that, right, then that indicates that you are not going to be as much of a sociable person. Now, if your eyelashes get to the point where you can't even blink your eye because they're touching your finger when you hold it like that, then that's more of a sociable type of person. So you might have more of that kind of ability to connect with others, to go out into the world and be around people a little bit more. Now, metal people tend to need a lot of alone time, a lot more than most of the other elements. Metal people are also going to do a lot better having their own office separated from other people, so having their own space. Whereas if you're more of an earthy person, then you might want to work in an environment where other people are around you. You might do a bit better with other people, at least in the same room or something like that. So rather than being in your own isolated office, which works really well for a metal person, that's probably not going to work as well for someone who has really strong earth element in them. So you can improve your energy here as well by reconnecting with your creativity and by identifying, where are you trying to force yourself into a box and how can you maybe stop trying to do that and instead reconnect with your own creativity, with the type of element that is strongest with you and the ways to really bring that out. Okay. So again, if you're more of a water person, why are you trying to act really fiery, right? That's probably not going to be very conducive. Okay, question number 4, how can I be a better team leader? So here you can look for leadership and teamwork on your face. So this can be, it's typically quite woody features again, the eyebrows, the jaw. Thick, healthy eyebrows with really strong eyebrow hairs do indicate leadership qualities, and a square jaw also can indicate really strong leadership abilities. Now, wider spaces on your face tends to be a good trait when you are working with other people. They can see your expressions. They can see what you're thinking when you have those wider spaces on your face. So that, again, you can see on my face that I do have those wider spaces, which is a little bit of that, again, sort of like that metal element too. Now, wood people and metal people often struggle with micromanagement. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, again, from this productivity standpoint, but they do it for different reasons. So wood people want to be in the know, to see what's going on with everything. Whereas metal people typically micromanage because they want to control the situation. So if you have more metal, if you're stronger in the metal element, you're going to be better off communicating very clearly what needs to be done so that you don't get sucked into micromanaging. So having being really involved with things works better for wood people. It's not as kind of insidious, whereas for metal people, it can get a little bit more insidious. So metal people do need to be a little bit more careful about that. And really, when it comes to leadership, and like team leadership and that kind of thing, it really is about knowing your energy. So if you don't have a lot of team leadership skills, then either A, maybe you'd be better off taking a different path in life, or B, you could build those skills and also play to your strengths. So think about the type of leader that you want to be. That's a really good thing to think about. If you're looking at your face, you're thinking, oh, I don't have strong leadership skills. Well, think about the type of leader that you want to be. Just because you don't have a square jaw, that doesn't mean that you can't be a leader by any means, okay? So, for example, if your eyebrows are very close to the eye, you will be better working closely with a whole team of people. Whereas if your eyebrow is really set apart from the eye, if it's much higher than your eye, then that's where you're going to be better at a bit of a distance from people. So that's like the teacher's eyebrow, is when your eyebrow is a little bit higher separated from your eye. So that's kind of that concept of, standing at a podium, somewhat separated from the students that you're teaching, right? So those are different types of leadership to consider. And also, the way that you express your emotions, the way that you communicate with people, that connects back to the size of your eyes, the shape of your mouth. So that can also come into play with leadership, because that communication piece absolutely comes into play if you are in that leadership capacity, that leadership role. And it's also worth looking at who is on your team. So what is the strength of the elements in the people that you are working with? That's also going to be important to take into consideration, because you might be really good at connecting with a specific type of person, a specific type of element, whereas other types might be it might create some friction, a bit more conflict. So I actually found this really interesting. I was just thinking about this earlier today, because I'm, the president of this board, and the person that we've hired to deal with a lot of things, I had contacted them, when was that? Like 10 days ago. And then again this past weekend, and I haven't heard anything from them. And I was getting to this point of being like, this is a time sensitive issue. We need to stay on top of this. They're not getting back to me. So I was trying to deal with it earlier this week. I was connecting with other people and being like, have you heard from them? And so I found out that someone else had, contacted them yesterday, and I still hadn't heard, what's the status of this issue. So I gave them a call today, the person we've hired. And I was like, we need to deal with this. Like, this is important. And they were like, oh yeah, no, we've gotten it taken care of. We're dealing with it. Like, we've got the date set for how we're taking care of it and all this type of thing. And I thought that it was so interesting, because we've had some, I guess, and I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily conflict, but definitely like communication struggle, where I like to be able to know that, like, okay, are you taking care of this or not? But from their perspective, they're very much the type of person who they just deal with it and then won't give me an update. So that sort of thing is a really good thing to keep in mind, because that style of doing things, where we've hired them, they're dealing with it, I like to have updates. Now, the next person who takes my place on the board might be totally different. I might not care about that at all. So it could be a complete non-issue. But those types of things are really good to consider when you are looking at the different way that people interact with one another. Are you hiring people that are going to support you in the way that you need? Are they communicating with you in the way that you need them to communicate? That's very important information. Very important information. Okay, question number 5. We're just about to wrap this up for today. The 5th and final question we have here is, why is it so hard for me to prioritize my own tasks over what someone else wants from me, and what can I do to break that cycle? Okay, so there's a few different aspects of the face, different lines on the face that can indicate people pleasing or putting people before you. So these include the over nurturing lines. So if you have lines on your upper lip, like sort of vertical lines, right? So it's kind of like puckered almost. Those are over nurturing lines where you are giving too much of yourself to other people. A vertical line on the philtrum. So your philtrum is that little divot, right? Right above the upper lip, between the lip and the nose. And if you have a line there, not the philtrum itself is like, you want that. That actually indicates your creative abilities. But if you have like a line running through the center of it, that indicates that you are, again, you're giving far too much of yourself to another person. So I don't have that. That's a dip, right? Like that's the philtrum itself, which is lovely to see. I'm just looking at that right now. My philtrum is getting deeper, which is good. That means that I'm being more of my creative self, because a little while back I was like, ooh, my philtrum is pretty shallow. I need to reconnect with my creative abilities. So those are two of the lines, two of the different aspects of the face that you can kind of watch for a bit of that people pleasing. Another really important one that can indicate people pleasing is lines that kind of like go down from the inner canthus of the eyes on the nose. And it's where you are smiling. It's not a real smile, right? It's that like, I wonder if I can kind of like scrunch up my face. So it's these kind of lines. It's those lines that kind of like come down like that. Those are disempowerment lines. Okay, so that indicates that you are giving someone else your power. You're trying to please them. You're, smiling, laughing when you don't actually think a thing is funny, or you're not actually feeling it. So if you have those lines, that does indicate people pleasing. Now, if you have, one of the interesting things here as well, if you do have a lot of the strong water features on your face, but you have no philtrum, right? So you don't have that little divot here between your nose and your lips. That can then also indicate that you are giving too much energy to others. Okay, so if you don't really have much of a philtrum, if it's super shallow, if it doesn't have like the nice ridges on either side, if it's not like a nice little divot, you are giving too much of yourself away, and you need to bring that back to yourself. So you do have to let people do things for themselves. Okay, you have to trust in their abilities to do that, and you have to stop giving too much of yourself to other people. Now, this is a whole thing, right? It's so much easier said than done. And this is also where we can 100% do coaching on this. This is the type of thing that I do coaching sessions with people on, because it's a very real issue that a lot of people struggle with. But, to begin with, when you're working through it, a few of the things you can kind of start to explore are, where did this people-pleasing behavior come from, right? Why do I feel the need to put other people before me? Can you trace it back to a time in your life or a person in your life? There may be some boundaries to set there. They could be external boundaries, right? Vocalizing things with other people. They could be internal boundaries where you're setting things and the other person doesn't actually ever need to know that you've set them, but you're creating your own little boundaries there. There's probably going to be some healing there to do. So that's good to keep in mind. And I will say as well that people who have a lot of strength in the earth element and the wood element, they tend to have the biggest problems with boundaries. If you are a very earthy person, if you're a very woody person, it can take more work to unlearn old behaviors and set those boundaries. And really, if you do have that kind of boundaries issue, you do need to learn how to receive love, how to receive help and support from other people. So that is going to make a difference as well. And boundaries are extremely, extremely important from that productivity standpoint. So you will want to focus on that. If you have by the way, if you have like any type of skin issues, the skin is the barrier, right, for the entire body, but for the face as well. The skin is the barrier to the outside world. So typically, any type of skin stuff connects in some ways to boundaries. And so where that might be showing up on your face can then indicate different aspects around, the age, right? The age that something might have occurred, the coloring of it can affect things, where, how it interacts with the topographical map of the face, or how like the face is like the human body, right? So it can kind of indicate where there might be other issues to kind of address. So that's something else to take into consideration as well. Okay, now to wrap this up, thank you so much for joining me today. Just to wrap this up, another reminder that all of this really, really, really depends on your unique face and the interaction between the features on your particular face. It's very, very much about the makeup of your face, the different elements of your face, all of that kind of stuff. So if you would like to learn more about this, if you're like, ooh, this is kind of fun and I want help with all of this, if you want to dive deeper into any of it, if you want to learn more about what your face says about you and how you specifically can use your face to improve your productivity, to increase personal fulfillment, to set better boundaries, to start putting yourself first instead of constantly putting other people before you, to start tapping more into your creativity and your energy, then let's book a face reading session. Okay, so you can reach out to me, hello@saganmorrow.com, to do that. Let's take a good look at your face. Let's do that. That'd be lovely. I would love to explore your face with you, and see what kinds of things can come out of that, and what you can learn about yourself, and how, again, we can improve your productivity and your personal fulfillment and your boundaries and the way that you interact with others, and all of that kind of stuff, connecting with your creativity. We can do all of that with a face reading session. Okay, so with that, I think we'll just wrap things up for today. As always, if you have any thoughts on this class, any feedback at all, if this was helpful for you, if you're interested in it, I would really love to know. So you can send me an email, and as always, when I send this replay to you, I will include the link as well to an anonymous survey. So you can share your feedback anonymously if that feels better for you. You can always do that, and you can send that at any time. It doesn't need to be, specifically like right away after watching this. You can send it at any time. You can think about things a little bit and then send it, whatever works best for you. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next month for our next Solopreneur Diary Entries Premium Edition class. Bye.